him down ever so politely, ever so loudly, so everybody who heard me being dressed down heard me dress him down.
Yep.
And I said to him, "Do not speak to me this way. You are not being respectful. This is my church and we are about to do a church service." He said, "Oh, it's your church, is it?" I said, "It's God's church in which I am the minister. Behave."
Yeah.
And I walked away. And the army were all, you should have seen them, they didn't want to look at me. Their eyes went down to the ground. And Rob came up to just check if my husband came up to me to check if I was all right. He said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Did you see that?" And he said, "Yeah, we all saw that." One of the guys came up to me and said, "Oh, your wife's copping a dressing down." And I assured him that you'd be just fine, Ness. I said, "Yes, I was fine. But I'm not going to be spoken to like that. That's rude. And I've copped weeks of this behaviour."
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Filthy Hope. If it's your first time here, welcome. On this show, we spend time in the grey spaces where Jesus, life and culture intersect. And I'm your host, Pastor Jonty. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Rev Ness.
Hey, brother, I've got a story. Can I hit you with the story?
Hit me with it. Let's get straight in.
We're going to be talking about power.
Yeah.
Power in the church and power in the world. And it's going to be a really interesting conversation. But can I just use a bit of power?
Yeah.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Hit me with
it.
it.
Happened today.
Yeah.
Well, wake up at 5:10, my alarm goes off and I've got to get up and go to Pilates. But last night, after watching Dancing with the Stars, the grand final, oh my gosh, that was fantastic. But that's another conversation. It's a Bridgerton conversation and you're not really into that kind of thing. So I won't bore you, any of the listeners, with any of that.
Hey, you could wield your power and 1 week we could talk about Bridgerton.
Oh,
I'll just plant that there.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have a ball next year, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, I've watched Dancing with the Stars and I go to bed and Rob's away and Aurora's staying at Mateo's, so I go and sleep with Mouse, which is the dog, downstairs because I've decided that I don't want to have her barking for 30 minutes while I'm trying to go to sleep because I feel bad, like a bad mother. So I go and sleep into her bed and so I leave my Maine Coons upstairs and go to sleep with the dog. It's lovely. 5:10, the alarm goes off. I get up and I take Mouse out for a wee and then I go upstairs. And the upstairs part of the house is full of mist. And I can hear a shower running. I think, shit, nobody's home. This is weird. What is going on? I go into my ensuite. There is water dripping down the bedroom walls. Every window in the house is now like condensation everywhere. And the hot water is on high in my shower. And for the entire upstairs floor of my home to have water running down the wall, literally, Jonty, coming down the walls, all the photos and paintings it's a disaster. And I don't know how this has happened. I turn the water off and I then go looking around. I instantly thought it's a ghost. What else am I going to think? How does the hot water...
I'm just imagining this as like the opening of a
movie.
Yeah.
Right, well...
I'm going to make a note. I'm going to write that movie for you.
Ghost? I thought, no, it's not a ghost. And then I saw my cat, my big cat Buster, big Maine Coon.
Who also has their own Instagram page.
Yeah, he's like a monster thing.
Link down below.
Yeah, he's tops. But he's got like this like mischievous bit of a... ears back kind of vibe going down.
Yeah.
And I said, I look at him and I think, oh, you're hungry, aren't you, mate? And he's just, nah, it was a different look. Then I go back into the bathroom and the only thing that was different was that I'd bought a loofah. You know those body things that you rub on your body to get your dead skin off? And it's got like a string around it and I'd put the string around the hot water tap, which has like a lever poking out from it. I think what's happened is the cat, because it's a big Maine Coon, I have this massive bucket thing that's about 2 feet long and about 1 foot wide, and I fill it with a couple of inches of water every day, and the cat uses it like a bath and a pond because it goes fishing in this pond. They love water and they're humongous. Very cute. I love watching him do it. It feels really like I'm a good mother by doing this for my cat. Both of them, they're different. They're unusual Maine Coons. Anyway, I went into the bathroom staring at it and I wondered if Buster had been flapping his hand up at the loofah and got his paw stuck in the fibre, went to pull down on it and then pulled the hot water tap on. And then and it was on maximum force, hot. I reckon it's been going for hours, hours and hours for the house to fill up like that. I just thought that was the most incredible story to start my day. That was how my day started today. To this morning. So I'm walking around with towels wiping walls, mopping up the walls in the house and putting on aircon to sort of dry up some of the humidity in the home. And, it was quite hilarious. I texted Rob, who's away, and he said, I've watched him turn the kitchen sink on. He's turned the tap on in the kitchen sink before. So much power in that creature.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Do you think it's funny?
I'm just when's your next water bill?
It's going to be
because that's when you'll find out.
Rob, but it's running on running hot water. We've got like not a tank, but an instant hot water thing.
Gotcha.
So the electricity bill as well. It's going to be massive. Yeah. But I didn't hear any of it, mate.
Just send the invoice to Buster.
That's right. Another side note.
Yeah.
On my annual leave, which is coming up very soon, I am going down because I'm a lover of cats. And I always wanted to be like Siegfried and Roy, the dudes in Vegas that had the big tigers, or were they lions? Clearly not such a great cat lady if I don't know what version they were. But they lived with them and one of the dudes got mauled by him in the end and ended up dying. But that didn't bother me as a young person. I just wanted to live with these lions. And I found this incredible place in Canberra where you can go and have an encounter with big cats. And so there's 3 brothers, leopards, that I can go and have an encounter with. And I'm doing that. You pay all this money to have this special occasion with them and the money goes to their conservation. And we're also going to feed the lions through a chain link fence. I am so pumped about that for a couple of reasons. I don't have to go to South Africa and do it because that would be really expensive. Yeah. And I can do it that close to home. Isn't that going to be fun? You wait for the podcast when I come back and tell you about that. I'm going to be living my dream, brother. I'm telling you, to sit with 3 brothers and cuddle them. I am just so excited about that.
We, my fiance and I, 8-9 months ago, it was last year, did the Roar and Snore at Taronga Zoo, which I've mentioned to you before. But we did like a wine tasting experience inside the tiger enclosure.
Far out.
Which, if you've been to Taronga Zoo, you can picture. You kind of go through a tunnel and then you're into kind of it's almost like not a full glass box, but there's sections of it that are almost like you're in the lion enclosure.
Wow.
And at one point, because they're so quiet, and they just blend in, you'll just be trying, this is the second one from bloody blah blah, and we're feeding you this incredibly fancy tiny morsel of food with it because it matches the blah blah and the blah blah, and they're like, there's a massive tiger like a meter away from my head.
Was that cool?
It was awesome. Really cool experience. You'd probably love it.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Do they do that all the time, or is it just summer?
I think it's just summer. I'd have to look into it, and they do a bunch of like Roar and Snore experiences. This was the like adult fancy one where you have food and wine and stuff.
I need to sign up for that.
Yeah.
That sounds cool.
You'd probably love it.
Yeah, I think I would.
Not just tigers, but you get to hang out with like
critters.
Feed giraffes in the morning.
I'm so excited about that.
Yeah.
We're going to do that. We're going to do the sit with the brothers, and then we're going to fly up to Cairns, and we're staying in Port Douglas, and we're going to do swim with the fishies.
Nice.
I'm so pumped.
Nice.
It sort of helped me regulate my vagal nerve. I think just get myself all calm and peaceful again with all the little creatures.
I've got a trip coming up in January for a couple of weeks, and then we're obviously starting to think about what we want to do for a honeymoon as well. So I've kind of got the travel and
so good
holiday bug at the moment. I'm thinking about what we're going to do there, and then planning one ahead again and like,
Yeah, you
what's the
have
next
to.
trip we're going to go on?
Right.
Yeah.
But isn't that fun?
Yeah, it's good fun.
Yeah.
I don't have that instinct.
Okay.
My family, like we traveled a bit when I was younger, but we didn't go on holidays every year,
Right.
overseas at least. Whereas my fiance just loves traveling.
Yeah, how wonderful.
So
She'll be all over it.
Yeah.
Oh, have you got any ideas for our honeymoon at this stage?
We got a few ideas. Some of them are contingent on a particular election that might be happening in the next few months.
Yeah.
Whether we want to go near that shit show. But,
Yeah. I'm going to be near that shit show 5 days after the election.
oh my goodness.
I
Yeah.
know. Right in the Midwest, mate.
Yeah.
There I'm going to be in Kentucky.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in Trump land. Literally.
Well, that'll be interesting to see how
Yeah.
that
Or
goes.
it might be Kamala land by then.
Yeah.
With any luck.
See.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah.
Please, Lord.
That was almost Event Central.
Oh, almost.
Almost.
But it was a bit of a cool story, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, did I hijack us?
No, that was great.
Was that right?
But we kind of got away with doing Event Central without me having to do extra editing work and putting the music in.
Oh, I usually... Okay, John T, play the music now.
So our main segment for today's discussion, we're talking about, I would say a dirty word in churchland, power.
Yeah.
It's something that we sometimes don't like to talk about. Who has power, power over, power with, how we use and exercise power. It's a big topic that, is relevant just in a global secular setting, but is particularly relevant for us as Christians and also as people that work in the institution of the church. So we're just going to crack into it, and we're going to be using an article from Andy Crouch that was in Christianity Today magazine about 10 years ago called "It's Time to Talk About Power." So I guess to open this conversation up for us, we both work for the church. We're paid employees of the local church. I'll throw this question to you, but it's also for me.
We're actually not employees.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it's part of our answer to this, I think, is how do we view power in the church? And what is our own relationship with power, being you're an ordained minister and I'm a pastor. How do we think about our own power? How do we wield power? What's coming up for you initially with this, Ness? Is that...
Yeah, that I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of power. I'm certainly not a fan of when people try to do the power thing over me. I am really aware of when that happens and I don't like it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me feel very safe. However, I don't mind power when it's executed well because I quite like authority.
Interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
but authority needs to come with a power that's respected. And I have no trouble with authority when the power is executed well. But when power is executed and you're in authority and it's done in a poor manner, then I am appalled by that. And I'll rail against that kind of behaviour. About personal power, I'm not a fan of that. I know I had power as a mum to keep my children safe, and so I would use my power to keep my kids safe by making decisions when they couldn't make decisions, helping them. So I suppose that's a position of power in the family unit. One to keep. That's how I saw my use of my power as a mother, to educate, to teach them about right and wrong and behaviour, and then answering on their behalf when they couldn't make answers that were safe for themselves, and I would step in and do that. So that's a good use of power, I think.
What about as a minister?
As
How
a
do you view
minister,
that?
I know being in ministry is of a position of power. I find it makes me feel uneasy to talk about, probably because it is.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. I like to think that I use any power that God has given me in the position that I'm in, that I like to use it in a way that educates my congregation and my people, that it leaves room for them to decide and make decisions about what I'm talking about. I'm not the font of all knowledge. I always make that very clear. I like to, when I'm unpacking a bit of text, scripture, that I'll unpack it to the best of my ability, but I am not the font. Go to the font, which is the Holy Spirit, and ask the Lord how this piece of scripture speaks to you. I can tell you what I think, but it's a living, breathing document that speaks differently to all of us at different times. So I like to be curious and to leave the question, and I often say it to my people, I wonder what you hear God telling you in this piece. This is the Bible according to Ness, I say, but what's God telling you about the text? And in the way that we do worship at Uniting Heart and Soul, I'll break people into groups and make them flesh it out, make them do the work. I don't want to just produce a monologue each week for people. I'll do my deep dive into the text and give them a good heads up on where we're going. But the answer really they'll work it out themselves between them and God.
So that's almost a model of the way that you're using your power as a minister is more about empowering your congregation.
Right. Yeah.
To take part.
Yes. As
opposed to, there are lots of different models of ministry, but one fairly like the stereotypical dude up the front
in the suit
telling you exactly how it is.
Right.
Here's what scripture says, so here's what you need to do, and here's what it means.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to paint this as a binary because it's not, but like those are two very differing models of how ministers can wield their power.
Right.
It's interesting, like, because at the beginning of this, you were talking about how you quite like when authority is used well and power is used well, then it's really comfortable.
I like that. It makes me feel safe.
So I'm curious to hear from you. Is there room? Have you thought about how that could be a part of the way that you implement your power as a minister? Not to say that I my own personal opinion is that the model that you exhibit in empowering the congregation to take part and I think that's wonderful, and that's my own preference. But have you thought about how you can maybe slide over towards that more? I don't know. Is that something you thought about? Because for some people that's really comfortable and really needed.
I like there to be a boss.
Yeah.
I feel very comfortable knowing that there's some bosses in the place. I like that a lot. I feel that I feel held well in that. Mm-hmm. And certainly when I came into the church as an ordained person, I felt like there was really good leadership around me at the time.
Yep.
And it felt that things were in good space. Well, according to me at the time, I may not have known really what was going on at the time, but I felt really well held, and there were some really smart people that knew so much and that they could help shape and form me on the way. I think I see my leadership in a role of leading my congregation, or my flock as we talk about in the Bible, and discipling them so that they can form deeper bonds of love with God than they might have had before, or get to crack open my understanding and experiential knowing of the Holy Spirit. I feel really responsible for that, that I feel like I really need to give them an experience of and share what I know and how the Spirit turns up for me. And I think that's available to everybody. And I feel that many in my congregation haven't had an experiential knowing of God. It's more been through academic learning.
Or intellectual, yeah.
Intellectual, that's great. But mine has been experiential before it became intellectual.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I could have been sustained as a Christian with just intellect. God must have known that my character was such that I needed experiential, because that in itself, those moments that I talk about a lot and share a lot, are as new and as fresh today as when they happened that 25, 30 years ago, you know? And those moments and knowing of the Lord in that way and feeling God's power rip through me was electrifying, as Danny Zuko said in Greece. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not hugely comfortable with power, but I you know how I notice it? How I noticed it first in my church.
Yeah.
It showed up this way, that I remember sitting down and I got asked, would I like a cup of tea? And I said, yeah, I'd love a cup of tea. And I got up to go and make myself, I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Let's go and all get a cup of tea. And Lynn said, oh, no, you stay, Vanessa. You're the minister. I'll get you a cup of tea. And I thought, nobody's ever bloody, as a minister, made me a bloody cup of tea. What is that about? What is that bit of whatever that is? And it made me realise that this congregation that I have come to have always had male ministers. And the women in the congregation would have assumed a stereotypical role of serving the minister.
Yeah.
And the first time was really cool. That was really cool, but I blew it wide open at that moment. I said, just FYO, this isn't something you need to do.
Yeah.
We do this shit together, girls.
Yeah.
Come on, this is ridiculous. No, you're the minister. I said, yeah, I'm the minister, but you're the chairperson and you're the this, and we've all got roles here, and we all can unpack the dishwasher together, and we can all pack the dishwasher together, and we all just muck in and get it done, okay? You do not have to wait on me. That is not expected of me. But I think that in that old paradigm of church, I'm calling it old paradigm, it probably still exists.
It's still a thing, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, in some places.
Yeah, well, I've now over 4 years, I've taught my congregation that they don't need to do that for me, so they don't anymore.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would be nice.
When you need it.
That's right. No, they're amazing. But that blew my mind, actually.
Yeah.
You know,
it's definitely like I experience a lot similar.
Yeah. Well, they do it to you.
Yeah.
Jonty, would you like, oh my gosh, we're just about to do a meeting, and they care more about what's in your guts, mate.
Yeah.
Have you had enough food, Jonty?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so interesting.
But
it's nurturing.
It absolutely it is. But I'm similar in that I find possessing power to be really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I definitely have noticed it more and more as I've sort of gotten older. And I've been working for the church since 2018, so
long time.
7th year.
Yeah.
My maths are spot on. And I notice it more and more, especially as a dude.
Wow.
When I'm in spaces that have both guy and girl and non-binary even ministry agents in the setting, the way that people are treated differently based on their gender identity.
Whoa.
And I find that really uncomfortable, and it's like I get placed above other people sometimes. And I have a strong hunch that it isn't a lot of the time intentional. It's just so deeply ingrained. Oh, you're a pastor. You've got a penis. There's a weight of power there that is societal and cultural that just automatically some people, not everyone, and thank God a lot of that has started to have been stripped away, especially in the Uniting Church. You don't get it nearly as much. I think because we're so blessed in the Uniting Church to have so many women in leadership,
Yes.
And also like gender diverse people. Like there's such a diversity of not just gender, sexuality, race, like all different things. We're such a diverse group in the Uniting Church in leadership that a lot of that stuff doesn't really happen anymore.
Yeah.
It still does sometimes.
Yeah.
It still does. And I find that deeply uncomfortable. A, because I don't feel comfortable with power, but also B, it's this weird thing of like being almost singled out because of something that I didn't choose to be a guy.
Yeah. Isn't it
That's just who I am.
Yeah.
But the way that people interact with me compared to other people is different because of that.
Yeah.
This is and they won't mind me sharing because I'm not going to share their names, but two really close mates of mine. This isn't a ministry example, this is a life example. They were meeting up on the way to walking to a train station at night.
Yep.
From different places, and they were going to converge both on the way and meet up at the train station. And one of them's walking along. It's probably 9:30 at night. There's a young woman walking along the street in front, and he notices her look behind and notice, oh, there's a guy walking, like, for all intents and purposes,
stressful,
following me.
Stressful.
She turns around, sees my other mate, then start to walk like along the cross.
Yes.
Sees him, turns around, sees my other mate, runs.
Oh, wow.
Runs off. And they're two of my best mates. They're the nicest, sweetest guys you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
In that moment, did not matter at all who those people were for that young woman.
Yeah.
All she saw was two men converging on her in an empty street at night.
Yeah. Uncool.
And of course, like, there's nothing they could do.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Yell after her to stop and explain? Like, no. Like,
no. You'd want to, though, I can imagine.
yeah, and all they wanted to do was to be like, how frustrating.
Yeah.
But like, that's an example where nothing that they did in that situation, like, it was just by virtue of the fact of who they are, that they were men.
Yep.
That rightfully so, culture has taught that person danger.
Yeah.
That's an example of how that a really dangerous form of power was bestowed on them in that situation that put that other person in a feeling of deep unsafety and panic and had to run.
Well, you watched me go through that just last week after we'd filmed. We were here till late. And we walked back to our cars together.
That's right.
And there was a weirdo in the lift with us.
That's right.
And I picked up weirdo unsafe vibes. You didn't. And you just kept chatting away to me and I'm going, oh my God, you're not even picking up that this is a weird thing. We get out of the lift. He's looking at me odd and I stay next to you and walk to your car and ask you to please drive me to my car.
Yeah.
You say, yeah, sure, yeah, okay.
Yeah, of course.
I said, weirdo alert. He said, oh, really?
And then I looked at him.
Yeah.
And suddenly picked up on all the signals that you were already picking up on.
Yeah, super
But I was
weird.
just completely blind to them.
Yeah. And I think as women, we that is a power position thing. And I felt safer knowing that at least I had you with me and there'd be two of us. There'd be the two of us if something happened. But I felt really unsafe until I got out of that car park. It was a horrible feeling.
It's a horrible car park anyway.
Horrible and dark and dingy, bloody awful, isn't it?
Yeah. But that's one example of like, and it's not just to do with my gender. Like that is a big part of it. That there's a cultural and societal thing.
Yeah.
That you know, I have benefited in the same way that as a white Anglo male, I've benefited from a colonial culture in Australia.
Yeah.
Without any repercussion. I also benefit from a patriarchal society.
Yeah.
As a male, I'm sure that there are times that I have perhaps willingly exploited that. If I thought really long and hard about it and was really honest, but most of the time it's just because of who I am and luck of the draw that I ended up being.
This arrangement.
And so then the question becomes, for someone like me and for someone like you who is in a paid position in a church, for example, how do you then wield that power well in a way that actually hopefully starts to deconstruct some of those harmful systems that have put those things in place.
I've got an example, a fresh example of a time I didn't do it so well. Is that helpful?
Please, yeah.
So we run this major event at Uniting Heart and Soul, which is the Posier's commemorative event. And there's a gentleman that we work with that is all power pervading, and he comes in, he organises this and liaises with the army and liaises with me to bring this event in our church, which is a massive event in our calendar every year.
Yeah, Battle of Pozieres.
Yeah, World War One.
World War One, like
Yeah.
it's a big deal.
Just straight after the Battle of the Somme, it's a big deal. Tens of thousands of men. It's the greatest casualty of World War One for the Australian army. Anyway, we commemorate the 19th Battalion because many men from our church went.
Yeah.
And we actually have this cross, this Posier's cross that was given back, and flags to the congregation after the war. Diggers came back and it was presented to the church, and they hang in our church. So we're one of the very few churches in the world that actually celebrate this, commemorate, not celebrate, the event. And it's a really moving thing. And it's a big thing to coordinate, because I'm working with the army, who are very hierarchical, talk about power. People behave in odd ways around these people of great power. The talk about costuming, the army costuming, the more lumps and bits you have on your shoulders, the more powerful the bigger your power.
Yeah.
Right? I don't, of course, give a shit about that. It's the church, God's church. I'm the minister in this church, and I have to do a church service and incorporate them and their power business into the church service. I love it. It's wonderful, and it's a real balancing act. Yeah. Anyway, nerves are a little bit frayed on the day because all the top brass are coming in. They're men with weapons. Everybody's in their best gear. I'm even dressed up in my robes. Other ministers are there in their robes. We've got Major General, the Honourable Paul Brereton, comes in and represents the army. It's a big thing, right? And the gentleman that I work with in getting this up and rolling for weeks in advance noticed a typing error, an order error in the order of what happens in the army, for the army stuff, that it had been fully rehearsed the day before, hadn't been picked up. He walks up to me and absolutely sticks it up to me. Sticks it to me, like loud and abusive. I'm in my robes. I'm all ready to do the church service. And this big, huge 6'4" man is telling me off. And boy, did I have the shits. I stepped into, I think, my God-given right of authority in that moment, and I shut him down ever so politely, ever so loudly, so everybody who heard me being dressed down heard me dress him down.
Yep.
And I said to him, "Do not speak to me this way. You are not being respectful. This is my church and we are about to do a church service." He said, "Oh, it's your church, is it?" I said, "It's God's church in which I am the minister. Behave."
Yeah.
And I walked away. And the army were all, you should have seen them. They didn't want to look at me. Their eyes went down to the ground. And Rob came up to just check if my husband came up to me to check if I was all right. He said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Did you see that?" And he said, "Yeah, we all saw that." One of the guys came up to me and said, "Oh, your wife's copping a dressing down." And I assured him that you'd be just fine, Ness. I said, "Yes, I was fine. But I'm not going to be spoken to like that. That's rude. And I've copped weeks of this behaviour." And he would regularly refer to me as a pagan because we're not Catholic.
Right.
It's like, it was just rude. And I had a gutful. So I called rank.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I did it really well, but boy, it shut shit down. And I had to get into the brain of what I was about to do. And I needed to, it was power. I used a bit of my ministerial power. Like, I've never done that before. Not that I'm aware of anyway. Like that was overt use of my power in that moment.
Yeah. And that's something, and we've spoken about this between the two of us about my aversion to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's necessary.
Yeah.
And that's an example where
I had to, John.
You had to.
Yeah, it was terrible.
But in a way that was like firm.
Yeah. But I was embarrassed. But then he walked off quite sheepishly, and I got a shock at that. I got a shock
because probably no one's ever not put up with it.
Yeah. And he was a very senior army man in the day, retired now, and a woman has spoken to him in this way.
Yeah.
And he never arced back at me. And we're best of mates since. I got a beautiful email from him after the event saying, "Thank you, Ness, it was amazing. It was the best one yet. All this is great. See you next year, blah, 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 blah." And so we just got on with it. It was quite lovely, really. But yeah, I think that's an example of me using power. I've never done it as a minister before. I've never used that in that manner ever before. Or can I tell you, I haven't needed to.
Yeah.
Ever. Yeah. I've never had an occasion that I've had to behave in that way.
Yeah, like I've probably had a couple.
Yeah.
And only recently have I actually stepped into that.
Great.
In the past, it's been, this is a time at which I need to exert my power. Too late, I let them walk over me.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
And that's like that process of going, power, and this is something I wanted to come to, is like power in and of itself isn't a good or bad thing.
Yeah.
In the same way that if we think about, we look at emotions as an example, anger isn't a good or bad thing. It's just information.
Yep.
It's what you then do with it. In the same way, power in and of itself, isn't a good or bad thing.
Yep.
It just is a thing that exists and exists at different levels to different people at different times.
Yep.
And it's what we then
do with
it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I think something to maybe throw in at this point is there's this article talks about low and high power distance, which is this idea that high power distance cultures or societies or structures have a very clear and definitive gap or distance, to use the framework of the article, between how you see people with power and not with power. So, for example, a high power distance church would be something like the Catholic Church, where it's very obvious who has the power.
Yes.
It's the dude, usually in the robes, waving around the smelly thing with the smoke.
And the pointier the hat.
Yeah, exactly.
And the pinker the hat, the more power.
Yeah. And again,
great.
Not a good or bad thing. It's just that's the way that works.
They win on costuming, mate.
Pretty sweet
love
costuming.
it. I'm so jealous of their costuming.
Yeah.
Those buttons. Those covered buttons.
See, this is where we differ. I could not care less about that stuff. I just kind of go, anyway. In contrast to that, the Uniting Church is a really interesting example in the way that our councils work.
Right.
So listeners who are Uniting Church people, even you guys may still find this confusing, so I'll just run through it really quick. Interconciliatory, is that the word? I'm using that right?
That's the one. I can't spell it, but you said it beautifully.
I couldn't spell it. I have to have a crack at it. Yeah. Council, so local church councils. So, for example, Uniting Heart and Soul and Wallara.
Yep.
Presbytery.
Yep.
So, for example, Sydney Presbytery, that Uniting Heart and Soul sit under.
We're in that,
Synod, which is New South Wales ACT.
State.
And Assembly.
The country.
The country. Those are the four councils.
Yeah.
All have power with, not over.
Yes.
So all four of those councils have the same amount of power in decision making.
And no one's the boss of anyone.
So that's an example of a low power distance setup. Even I would say the way that we, the two of us, me as a pastor, you as minister of the word. We were talking before.
I'm a deacon.
Deacon. Deacon, not minister of the word. Ordained is the phrase I meant to use. You were saying very rarely do you actually put the collar on.
Yeah.
Only for funerals. And things that...
Big special
events.
It's
important that there's a high power distance.
Right.
Whereas usually the way that we both roll is we're just...
Cash.
We're people,
Yeah. how we roll.
I'm wearing a fleece and jeans today. And you're like,
Exactly.
So
I only put that collar on. It's often when I'm in a role where other denominations will be coming into our space, and people from other denominations need to distinguish who the minister is.
Yeah.
And so that's a universal, the collar is a universal symbol for that's what the minister looks like. And because I'm a female as well, I find it very helpful.
Yeah.
Particularly at a funeral, because you don't know everybody. If I'm invited to do a funeral for somebody and I don't know everybody because they're not a part of my congregation, and I haven't met all their extended family, so they're just outside our gathered community, it's really important for people to know who the minister is.
It's like on a film set. You need to know who the director is, not so that you can bow down at the director's feet, but just you need to know who to go to for decisions.
That's right.
So the reason I bring this up, there's a quote that I want to read from this article that says, "This is the problem with low power distance."
Yeah.
So this is the problem with when it's actually not as easy to distinguish who has power. It can deceive us into thinking that power is not an issue that requires our attention, let alone a matter for discipleship. And the ones most likely to be deceived are the ones with the most power.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch in there, but firstly, it's not enough to kind of disregard power as something that isn't worth attention.
Because there is, if you think about the Uniting Church, while we have this low power distance, have I said that correctly?
Yep. Yeah.
We have these interconciliatory councils of the church that collaborate, get together, do what we do, and on the most part, we all do it really well and play very nice in the yard together. I think where it goes wrong, and I have this chronic need then for a boss and there to be some bloody leader who's going to step in. High power distance that steps in and says, no, it's black and white, it goes like this. I think when a crisis happens, and if a crisis happens in one of the councils of the church and there's no boss, I feel that that makes me feel quite unsafe, actually. I crave some kind of leader to step in and mop up. Do you know what I mean? But for us, it's left to our councils to mop up, isn't it? Yeah.
Which is
beautiful, but scary at the same time.
And I was going to ask a question in relation to this. You've kind of started to answer it, is do we want people with power to look powerful? And if not, why? Do we prefer people with power to kind of conceal that, or do we actually need the people that wield power to look like they wield power sometimes? And in a crisis, like you say, it can be really comforting and calming to know,
we're in control.
Shit might be hitting the fan, but
the boss is here.
The boss is here. Obviously, the counter to that is, that's what leads to Nazism. And fascism. That none of these frameworks are perfect.
No.
But like that's kind of the wrestling where you kind of go, it's good to have, because you're right, when you kind of go, everything's okay, the boss is here.
Yeah, he or she'll sort it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like that thinking is the seed of where fascism ends up.
If it's done poorly.
If it's
a power over.
If it's a power over, not a power with.
Yeah.
Which again is all down to how you wield the power.
That's right.
That you have.
Yeah. In our church, I think, in the Uniting Church, broadly speaking, I think we do a really good crack at it. I really do. This non-hierarchical, it's a perception of non-hierarchical
because there's still space for someone to step into it, right?
Yeah, but there is power. We've been in meetings where we've watched power take place.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
So there's people that step in and it's when it's done well, I think we function beautifully. And that's what God wants for us anyway, to function well.
I was reflecting about how we wield our power.
You and me?
As in you and I.
Yeah. How do you do it?
And I kind of went down this rabbit hole of like, I don't wield power that much. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, no,
Podcast
shit.
director?
I use it all the time.
Yeah.
Like literally. And I realized I have the power with my editing tool.
You do.
To make either of us or any of our guests say anything that I want.
Yeah.
And that's a huge amount of power that I have and a huge responsibility then
Massive.
to honour us and our words, but also the time and energy of our guests to best represent the conversation that we have.
Because our words have power. And I hadn't realised until recently. I did know all the way through college that I had a spiritual gift of encouragement. I knew that was a part of who I am and how I be a person. And I didn't think it was a gift. I just thought that's what I just am. That's how I be me. Until recently, very recently, I had an opportunity to oversee a member of my congregation doing this really powerful pastoral care to a grieving member of the community. And it was just so powerful. And I hadn't seen this person in this way operate this way before. It was like everything that God had equipped them for was outpouring through them in this moment. And it was such a delight for me to see and to watch that I hovered around. I did clean up. I'm picking up cups of tea and wiping up the banana cake and just letting this person do what I felt called to do in that moment, which was absolutely magnificent. And it had healing tones and it was just had Jesus thumbprint all over it. Anyway, we wrapped up church, I headed home and I was reflecting on the morning and I thought, I'm just going to drop a message to that person and just say how grateful I am for what I witnessed, and were they aware of how powerful their words were to the recipient. And I'm very grateful for the sharing and the way in which that was done. It was just beautiful. Anyway, I just did that and went on with the rest of my day, didn't think another thing of that until I got a message back from them later in the day saying, thank you so much, your words were so encouraging to me. And I hadn't realised the power of the word of encouragement.
And not only is it the encouragement, but that carries more weight coming from you,
right,
their minister, than one of their mates sending them the same message.
Yeah, right.
Because there is power inherent in the role that you were in.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. I know when there's this woman that I really respect in the church in Synod, and when she has sent me a text, and this one line, I've told her this just for her own feedback. I said, that one line that you sent to me was the greatest healing balm. It was like God had put his fingers into a tub of Vicks Vapor Rub and wiped it over my heart, and there was, a scent of healing that just oozed over my being in that one line that she'd said to me. I thought she needed to know that. So that's power, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I see that as God's power. That's God's ability to use us as instruments for healing. But that's powerful.
I think it's both. Because in both of those situations, from the congregation member's perspective, you're in a position of power.
Yeah.
That is, and that this gets to a discussion about what ordained ministry is, a God-given role. It's also a position in an institution.
Yeah.
So it is God-given power, but it's also, from their perspective, someone in a position of institutional power.
Yeah.
But in both situations, you as this person's minister, and in the other situation, you and someone in a leadership role at a synod level, there is God-given power, but there's also institutional power and like this sense of like, I just think that's also something that we can't get away from, in the sense that like, and I wrestle with this, where things that I say to people place more weight on those words because I'm a pastor. Even though me as a person, I'm the same as I always have been. I'm just me.
Yeah.
But my place within the institution puts weight and power behind the words that I use.
Yeah.
And that's something we can't be flippant or ignore. Like that's real.
Yeah.
Even if for us,
Yeah.
for you and me, for example, it doesn't feel real because the person that I am hasn't changed.
Yeah.
For other people, it is very real.
Yeah.
It is very real. It's partly cultural as well. Like in some cultures, I think of Reverend Kevin Kim at Taramara Uniting, who's with Phil and Gibbo, our new youth worker.
Yeah.
Within Korean culture, especially
massive.
historically, like
Whoa. Oh my
the
gosh.
amount of like power bestowed upon ordained ministry agents is completely different culturally
Yes.
to a more Anglo understanding of ministry.
Oh, Reverend Viniana Ravatali, who I used to work with at MLC school,
Yeah.
Fijian Talatala,
Yep.
the power that I've died watching her and the power that people bestow, how they behave around her because she is a minister of the word, a Fijian minister of the word. It's held in great esteem. It's just quite extraordinary, actually.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
And it almost doesn't matter whether or not you recognise that.
Like,
exactly.
She can't not be
that decision's made for you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not about Vinny in that moment. It's actually about the culture and how they operate within, how they see that role. It's quite extraordinary, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to use I was wondering if this was going to come up or not, the cheesy Spider-Man thing of with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, and it does.
Like whether or not you recognise it, it does.
Yeah.
It just does. And that took a while for me to kind of be comfortable with is like, okay, well, I can't be kind of, sheepish about the fact that I do or don't have power in a position that I'm in. I just do now. And like you just have to be responsible and use it well.
Yeah.
And recognise that you do.
And I think it's interesting that you and we have a similar vibe in how we do, how we be, how we
absolutely.
how we be. Do you know what I mean? I think we try. I used to describe it as dumbing it down because I was uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with that perception.
Yeah.
I don't want to be different from everybody else.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't. I just want to be a part of the gang. Do you know what I mean? I just want to be in the group. So I will do anything to kind of repel that perception. And often I'll use language that a minister may not normally use just to show somebody that I'm not how you think I might be. I'm not going to behave in a manner that I'm going to catch you unaware maybe.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be that person.
I had a really interesting experience over the weekend that speaks to that. I was hanging out with some friends from high school. If you're listening, g'day. It was great fun. I ended up being out later than I have been out
in a long
time. Got home at like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
We discovered the basketball lane in the bar after we were about to leave. And Anyway, but I ended up having this conversation with two different conversations with mates from high school who they're not Christian. They're definitely like in having these conversations curious about spirituality and realized that, I was always like, I was never like keeping it a secret that I was a Christian at any point during high school, after high school. And so people always knew that I was a Christian. But now people know that I'm a pastor.
Yeah, wow.
And so these two guys from high school came up to me and were asking me these questions that they've never asked me before.
Wow.
And I suddenly had this reflection of like, oh, it's not just power within the institution. There's now a weight on the words that I share that weren't there before. And not to say that they wouldn't listen to me about these things or even that they wouldn't ask me about these things previous, but it was, we really value what you have to say about this. And they even clarified, like, we're not taking the piss. Like, you might think that we're making fun, like, just, poking at you because you're a pastor now. They were being genuine and asking the question in a way that I hadn't experienced necessarily from those guys before. And so then you kind of start to second guess yourself. It's like, if this is the one interaction that they have that influences the next 10 years of their spiritual journey.
Oh my, wow, there's power.
I just had to stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because if you start thinking about it too much, you're not going to say anything.
Right.
Because the weight of the importance of that interaction suddenly becomes, and it may not be that important, but like that was a real moment where I kind of went, oh wow, not only do I have power in this situation to affect someone's life, really, but the power there is almost too much for me to really intellectualize.
Yeah.
Like, and it's actually better if I simply act as a friend.
Yep.
Which I think brings us nicely to when we look at scripture for examples of power. As Christians, the obvious one is we look to Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus is God. And in the 30 odd years that Jesus was on earth, he wielded ultimate power.
Yep.
Like divine power.
Yep.
So we can look to Christ as a example of how to wield power.
But he didn't do that with knives and swords and flashy horses.
People thought he was going to.
Yeah.
Judas is a great example. He
big letdown.
assumed that he was going to be a military leader to literally free them from the Romans in a military revolution.
Yeah.
Instead, we see someone who exhibits servanthood and washes people's feet and speaks into people's lives in a way that was radical and went completely against culture. Like he didn't just hang out with, but he intentionally spent time with people that society pushed to one side and ultimately allowed himself to be crucified. When at his disposal, he could at any point
so much power.
have stopped it.
Yeah, that's right. Servant king is an expression that we often read, don't we, to describe Jesus.
So in relation to this conversation, when we've been talking about power, it's almost like a complete contradiction to almost just about everything we've been talking about. In true power is actually servanthood.
Yep.
When you bestow such power, to actually use it to flip it upside down and put yourself at the bottom of the pile.
Yep.
Which I'm not going to lie, and this might sound like I'm upping myself. I'm really not. I feel significantly more comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
Because I would rather go unnoticed.
Yeah.
I don't like being the center of attention. I don't like being the figurehead of anything, so to speak. I don't like the attention. I would rather, if not palm it off to someone else, use it to encourage other people because it's not about me. And that's a more selfish reason to do that. But I mean, there was something in here about servanthood. Power is not the opposite of servanthood. Rather, servanthood is the very purpose of power. For you as a deacon, what does that look like?
Well, we wear the fancy sashes, and I've told you that before. It's swung to the side like a, Miss America sash or Miss Congeniality sash. For very good reason. It's indicative of being to the side because the deacons are the ones. Our symbol is the basin and the towel for washing the feet of the people. So I feel like I can be a servant leader in my community, and I'm passionate about this, by not necessarily washing people's feet, but I would do that if the need was there. I would definitely wash anybody's feet that wants a foot wash. I can do a good pedi, not a problem. But I think the idea of serving my community in a way that is meaningful and useful, in a way that's a show of extravagant love, is something that I'm passionate about, and that's what Jesus did also. I just try to model him. He probably didn't have a naughty language like I have, but that's okay. I'm on the road to sanctification, Jonty. I'm not cooked yet. I've got a bit of time up my sleeve.
I mean, he did use some pretty wild language at times.
Well, no.
Just those
do you think?
4-letter words didn't exist back then.
No, they didn't. Well, others did.
Calls a woman a dog at one point.
Oh, that was pretty rough. Exactly. Yeah, that wasn't cool.
We should talk about that on the show at some point. Just make a mental note. We'll talk about that story.
Okay. I think the servant heart, serving our community in a way with extravagant love, that's how I try to do some of my best leadership role in doing what we do through Wellness HQ, providing the free and low-fee counselling to people. But my whole community is a part of that. They're doing servant heart because they're allowing that to happen as well. And that's extravagant love because counselling's not cheap, you know. So I think discipling the community through love and through teaching, that's how I do. That's how if I have power, that's what I use it for. For teaching, for guiding, for pastorally caring for people. Lots of hours spent pastorally caring for people, listening. There's power in that. The power of the words that you can say. There's power in just being a compassionate witness in listening. That's powerful. It's a powerful role. It's a powerful responsibility just to sit and take space for another and to hear their sorrow. That's powerful. So I think that's how I use it. Was that the question you asked me?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, I think the wrestle for me, and this kind of we had another thing that we might talk about this now as well, is what, and this is a little roundabout that'll come back to here, but it gives the context necessary. When you look at people that desire power, the people that cling to it, it's often linked to, not always, but it's often linked to some level of narcissism,
right,
and some level of wanting control.
Yeah. Do you think it's a pride and ego thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about in the abstract without it like a specific person, but I think often there is, like there's pride and ego and control attached to wanting to be in positions of power, because when you're in a position of power, A, people look up to you, theoretically. B, you have control over a whole bunch of things, how people can perceive you, how people interact with you.
Often money.
Often money as well.
Prestige.
Yeah, and the reason I bring this up is that when we're looking at like the example of Jesus, I aspire, something that I desire for myself is to be so secure in my own identity as a follower of Jesus, as a child of God, that there's no need for me to seek the validation and control and like the level of manipulation that you see like master narcissists do in like managing
people.
their own perception.
Yeah.
I aspire to being so content and secure in my own identity as a child of God, as a follower of Jesus, that I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
That actually is a contradiction of who I am.
Yeah.
The idea of pursuing power because it fuels my ego is in complete contradiction to the idea of just living into the identity of who I am now as a child of God. That's where I want to be.
It's
because when
beautiful.
you're there,
Yep.
you can't help but be servant-hearted.
Yeah.
If you're living following the footsteps of Christ, and your entire life in relation to the power that you wield is about using that to benefit the people around you and to make the world a better place, then the idea of, needing to manipulate how people perceive you or to hang on to control over things doesn't even enter into that equation. I'm not there. That's where I want to be.
That's beautiful that you're aware. Think of Mother Teresa. She was just the servant of all servants, wasn't she? She just was Jesus on steroids in a female form, Yet she was probably one of the most famous, powerful women on earth. Yet the power that she had came completely from God, and the work that she did to serve the least of these in the communities of Calcutta.
I think about at the end of apartheid.
Yep.
With Nelson Mandela.
Yep.
By every measurable metric, should have been a bloodbath.
But what a great use of his power.
Yeah.
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 A responsible, godly use of his power.
Yeah. Yeah. And a use of power that would have been driven by
Oh, can you imagine?
justice.
Oh, and rage.
Rage.
Pissed off, locked up on that island.
A purely like clinical, numbers-driven desire for justice
Yes.
would have led to a completely different outcome.
Yep.
But that's an example of power being wielded that led to peace against all odds.
Yeah,
Like-
totally.
And at the time, I can only imagine some members of the community being completely like shocked, but like outraged. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Justice needs to be done. Not only for your people, but like you've been in jail.
Yeah.
Like
He flipped it,
so
didn't he?
much injustice and so much violence and so much hatred could so easily have just led to a repetition and a fresh
Repeat.
cycle.
Yeah, that's right.
But man, the confidence
yeah.
and the radical, like so countercultural to be able to not do that and actually lead through the gate to peace somehow against all odds. I see that as such like an incredible example of wielding power in a way that similar to that of Jesus.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Can I finish with this?
Sure.
It says in this document that we've been reading, all our uses of power ultimately will either reflect or distort the image of the true King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. We are meant to imitate the one who became naked so that we might be clothed. He rose from the utter dependence of death with an imperishable body, more fully clothed, so that we, too, clothed in his merciful robe, might be fully knowing in love's embrace. There we will find more vulnerability and more power than we ever feared or dreamed. Amen.
Rick, there was a section there about reflecting or distorting the image of God.
Yep.
Just hit me with that bit again because I think that's gold.
He says, all our uses of power ultimately will either reflect or distort the image of the true King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Yeah.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So do we want to reflect or distort?
Yeah. So I think that's the takeaway for this week, I think, is recognizing for everyone listening or watching, doesn't matter who you are, you do wield power.
Yeah.
And it's different in all different contexts with all different people, but recognizing wherever you are today, whoever you are interacting with, what power you wield in that situation and deciding, is this going to reflect the truth and the love of God, or is this going to distort it? I think that's a really good way of, like a good lens to kind of refract
Beautiful.
our power through.
Awesome.
Thanks for
Good
chatting.
convo.
That was really good.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
It was complex.
It was. There was a lot to unpack.
I feel like I've been at the gym.
I know. I felt like I had to be vulnerable.
Yeah. And I mean, if people listening want to contribute to the conversation, they can join our Facebook group. We'll no doubt have a good chat in there about power.
If anything you think that we've said is dodgy, let us know.
Yeah.
Please. We care more about what you think, actually, than being right. So flick us a note on our Facebook page.
Yeah.
I want to know.
Yeah, shoot us an
DM us.
email at filthyhopepod@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Or find us on socials as well. But if you want to really get into the nitty-gritty, let's join the Facebook group. That's
to have a
where it
convo
happens.
about it. Yeah.
The only other thing that I will talk about now before we wrap up is we have our next live show coming up on the 27th of October.
Crowd goes wild. Yeah.
We're following up our, I think, really successful and such a great event. We're doing it again at Evolve at Taramara Uniting Church on October the 27th.
Come along.
by the time this episode airs, there will be some material out for you to follow up with. There's a link down below that you can check all the details out there as well. We'll be announcing some guests very soon as well. We'd love to see you there. Yeah, that's just going to be a ball.
It's going to be fun.
Looking forward to it.
Yep.
We'll feed you, so register so we know how many you feed.
Perfect.
Thanks for chatting.
Thank you.
And we will see our listeners tomorrow for some Into the Word, if you're a listener there. If not, back here next week for more Filthy Hope. Next week, we have Monique Coven on the show.
Oh, wow. Trauma Healing Podcast.
Yeah, so...
That was a great interview. I loved talking with her.
Yeah.
Oh, she's epic.
So look forward to that. We'll be doing that next week. Have a great week. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.
Catch you later.
This is a prayer for the people who want to give up, who have been hurt beyond repair and cannot bear to see your face in anything. Find peace in letting go of the guilt that is in yours, and find hope in understanding. Life is not a game you have to win. Forgiveness overwhelming, salvation not deserving.